Y tengo a los siguientes invitados. De manera virtual nos va a acompañar la señora Celia Martínez. Ella es coordinadora técnica para Latinoamérica y África de la Iniciativa de Energía Distrital en Ciudades del Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Medio Ambiente. La señora Celia Martínez es ingeniera industrial con un máster ejecutivo en gestión energética. Ha trabajado durante los últimos 6 años apoyando a las ciudades de los países en desarrollo y las economías emergentes para acelerar el despliegue de los sistemas de energía distrital. Antes de incorporarse a la iniciativa de energía, distrital. También vamos a tener al señor Marco Mateini. Marco Mateini sí nos acompaña aquí de manera presencial. Lo vimos aquí en nuestras palabras de apertura. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Y bueno, les recuerdo que él es oficial de Desarrollo Industrial en la División de Sistemas de Energía e Infraestructura de la Organización de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo Industrial, ONUDI. Bienvenido, señor Mateini, póngase cómodo. Y les cuento también que el señor Mateini tiene un doctorado en Ingeniería Eléctrica de la Universidad de Bolonia en Italia. Tiene más de 20 años de experiencia en el desarrollo e implementación del proyecto de cooperación de energía sostenible en países como Sudáfrica, Ghana, Moldova, Rusia, Turquía, Ucrania, Cuba y Colombia, donde apoya la implementación del proyecto de distritos energéticos en Colombia, fase 2. Desde el 2008, Marco representa a la ONUDI en el Comité Técnico ISO 242-301, Manejo y Ahorro de Energía, donde ha participado activamente en la creación del estándar ISO 5001. También vamos a invitar o a recibir de manera virtual al señor Casper Koeft. Él es coordinador regional, unidad del Protocolo de Montreal y compuestos orgánicos persistentes para América Central y el Caribe del Programa de las Naciones Unidas para el Desarrollo. El señor Casper Koeft tiene un máster en Economía de la Universidad de Copenhague y cuenta con más de 20 años de experiencia profesional a nivel internacional. Por aquí, continuamos con continuamos con el señor Koeft. Les contaba que tiene 20 años de experiencia profesional a nivel internacional, donde se ha centrado en trabajar en convenios sobre productos químicos como el Protocolo de Montreal, Estocolmo y el Convenio de Minamata. Anteriormente trabajó en finanzas corporativas en TDC Teledanmark y en el Ministerio de Finanzas de Dinamarca. Nuestro siguiente panelista también nos acompaña de manera virtual, el señor Peter Johansen. Él es especialista senior en energía del Banco Mundial. El señor Johansen tiene una maestría en Ciencias de la Universidad Técnica de Dinamarca y más de 35 años de experiencia en el sector de eficiencia energética y energías renovables, 18 de los cuales han sido en el Banco Mundial. Tiene también experiencia en proyectos de distritos térmicos en Dinamarca, Europa Este y Central, Rusia y Mongolia. Actualmente coordina el programa de energía del Banco Mundial para Centroamérica y República Dominicana, donde está involucrado en proyectos de promoción de sistemas de enfriamiento eficientes para el sector de construcción y cadenas de frío en la agricultura. La moderación de este panel será realizada por la señora Natalia Mayorga. Ella es jefe adjunta de la Oficina de Cooperación Económica y Desarrollo SECO de la Embajada de Suiza en Colombia. Natalia, bienvenida, gracias por acompañarnos. Ya le voy a dar paso, pero quisiera primero presentarla. Ella es abogada y politóloga de la Universidad de los Andes con maestría en Asuntos Públicos de París. Cuenta con 15 años de experiencia en el área de gerencia de proyectos y análisis de política en el campo del desarrollo y la cooperación internacional. Su trayectoria profesional ha incluido un paso por el sector público colombiano en el diseño de política pública en el área de posconflicto y construcción de paz, y una trayectoria en la cooperación internacional trabajando con organizaciones internacionales como la OCDE, bancos de desarrollo y cooperantes bilaterales en el campo de evaluaciones de políticas públicas y gestión estratégica de proyectos en las áreas de medio ambiente, desarrollo agropecuario, infraestructura y desarrollo urbano sostenible. Yo los dejo con las palabras de Natalia Mayorga, quien va a liderar este panel que trae como tema central cómo avanzan los distritos térmicos en Latinoamérica. Natalia, adelante. O si quieres te dejo este.
Muchas gracias, muy buenos días a todos los que nos acompañan de manera presencial y virtual. And I will come to English as my panelists feel more comfortable speaking in English. And I want to, first of all, to highlight that this panel, where is located this panel in terms of the narrative of the whole Congress. The idea is that we are going to go from a more broad view on energy districts. That's why we started with the vision of how Colombia is doing some progress in this infrastructure, and then the idea is go to understand a little bit more on the progress of this infrastructure in Latin America, to then jump during the 2 days to a specific topics for the development of these projects, going through the financial models, the important use of renewables as a source of operation of this infrastructure, green financing as well, and of course the topic related with human capital. So with that context, I would like to highlight that the objective of this panel is to give an overview of the progress of the energy districts in Latin America through different thematical angles, because we have different experts here. Some of them have more expertise in the European experience of energy districts, and some of them more on the Latin American, but of course, all of them can give a very important view on this infrastructure. And the way we want to conduct this panel is in 2 sections. So the first section is going through this theme of the progress of energy district in Latin America through 4 specific thematics. Then I will ask the audience who is connected virtually and who is here in presence to prepare your questions. Then we're going to have a section of questions related with these 4 thematic angles, and then we'll jump to a more institutional questions, because we wanted to hear from our experts what their institution think about the progress of energy districts in Latin America and the world. So thank you very much, and sorry for the delay to our panelists, because we are 30 minutes in delay, but thank you very much for the interest. So I will jump then to the first round of questions, which is our thematic questions. And we select them considering the expertise that we have on this panel. I will begin the question for Casper, related with energy districts and the relevance in the climate change discussion. These take into account that COP26 came to their conclusion with urgent call on undertaking concrete actions to fight climate change. So, Casper, what do you think is the role that energy districts can play among the measures that can contribute to meet the goals of the Kili Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, the Paris Agreement, and the SDGs agenda, and how did this represent an opportunity to deploy this infrastructure in Latin America?
Okay, so UNDP would like to thank the organizers of this important event for the invitation to participate in the panel on district cooling. I think in UNDP, we strongly believe that district cooling is a key piece of the long-term solution in the cooling sector. The potential is big, especially in the commercial air conditioning sector. But please let me first explain why it fits perfectly with the objectives of the Kigali Amendment on HFCs, the Paris Accord, and the SDGs. So I'll try to provide some of the international context around this. Compared to the business as usual scenario, the Kigali Amendment on HFCs is expected to reduce the global warming of up to 0.4 degrees. And similar mitigation efforts are expected to be achieved through improved energy efficiency measures in the refrigeration and air conditioning sector as a consequence of the transition towards low GWP refrigerants. So the Montreal Protocol has in its first two phases, both with the phase out of CFCs and HCFCs, mainly been focusing on the refrigerant management in the cooling sector. The Kigali Amendment on HFCs is not limited to the change in refrigerants, but clearly states that co-benefits from energy efficiency should be addressed simultaneously. The mitigation potential of the cooling sector is therefore tremendous and often considered one of the low-hanging fruits under the Paris Accord. And it was brought up by several parties in the discussions in the past 2 weeks in the Glasgow under the COP26. There's a recognition that the cooling sector will be key to achieve the aspirational goals of CO2 mitigation in 2030 and onwards. So within the cooling sector, district cooling should be considered the high standard for what can be achieved in terms of mitigation potential on both the direct and indirect CO2 emissions. A well-functioning district will normally lead to at least 50% reduction in CO2 emissions, and this number can be as high as 85 to 90% if the right conditions are in place. So talking about free cooling from seawater, access to waste heat, etc. The mitigation potential is therefore huge and has been proven in other parts of the world, especially in Sweden and Northern Europe, the Gulf states, and it's starting up in China and India. Latin America is currently behind this. There's a low market penetration of district cooling, but the potential is clearly there. So there is a need to push for a market towards district cooling with all this entails. Let me mention it again. For commercial air conditioning in higher density areas, there's a potential to reduce the carbon footprint by at least 50% and sometimes much more than that. In how many sectors can you achieve similar reductions of CO2 under the Paris Accord? At the same time, this is good business for utility companies as well as the off-takers of the cooling. UNDP has developed business case studies for several districts in several countries in Latin America. Even with very conservative assumptions, it has been shown that the internal rate of return of the investments are often about 10%, without mentioning all the co-benefits for both the utility company as well as for the end users. This includes higher reliability, less volatile prices, space saving in the building, higher asset values for building owners, and for the utility companies, it can help to manage the peak loads, facilitate the introduction of renewable energy, as well as other benefits that I know that some of the other panelists will get into more detail about. UNDP is currently working with funding from the GEF on a district cooling project in Trinidad and Tobago. One of the pilots is related to a university and surrounding area where business development is planned for the near future. There's access to waste heat from a nearby electricity generation plant, which in practice would provide free cooling via absorption chillers. The project is expected to reduce CO2 emissions of up to 90% for the district compared to the business as usual scenario. This is a clear indication of the environmental benefits associated with district cooling. District cooling is a sustainable solution for air conditioning, especially in the commercial sector, and could potentially address maybe up to 25% of the cooling demand. This will, in many ways, have a positive impact on the achievements of the SDGs. The most obvious one is SDG 13 on climate action, but it's also linked to SDG 12 on sustainable production and consumption, as well as SDG 11 on sustainable cities. Access to comfort cooling is not a luxury, and it positively affects the productivity and well-being of people. Links could be made to many of the other SDGs. I stop my first intervention with this and looking forward to come back later. Thanks.
Great, Casper. Thank you very much for highlighting all these environmental benefits that come from these projects in cities, and of course the link to all these international instruments that are focalized to fight climate change. I want to jump more into the implementation aspect of the Energy Districts project. And then I will ask Celia, based on her experience, the following questions. What do you consider are the main implementation bottlenecks of energy district projects in Latin American cities that, if can be overcome, can contribute to accelerate the deployment of this infrastructure in Latin America?
Thank you very much, Natalia, and I also wanted to thank the organizers for inviting the United Nations Environment Program to this panel. So six years ago, when UNEP initiated its work on district energy, the first thing that we did was trying to analyze how cities had been able to develop and scale up their first district energy projects. And with this work, our intention was try to identify common barriers and bottlenecks for the development of district energy systems and see how other cities and countries had been able to overcome these barriers. And from there, we tried to identify, define a methodology that we've been able to test in different countries, and in Latin America, we've implemented a program in Chile. We've also tested it in India, Morocco, in other countries as well. What is interesting is that we've perceived similar challenges among the different countries in different regions. And what are these challenges? The first one, or the main one, is the lack of capacity at the city level to identify and take the first steps required for project preparation. In new markets, what we realized is that municipalities, the local governments, the local officials often don't have internal technical capacity and the tools to be able to identify district energy projects. They may not even know that district energy might be the most cost-effective solution to supply heating and cooling to a particular area within their cities. And the problem is that due to the characteristics of district energy systems, because they connect multiple buildings, because these buildings may have multiple owners, because you may need to use public land, because they are big infrastructure, because they may require high upfront costs, etc. Due to these characteristics, local governments play a key role in the development of district energy projects. Their engagement is crucial to identify project opportunities and also to bring them to procurement. So if they are not aware of the technology in the first place, or don't have the internal capacity to bring the projects forward, we experience the first bottleneck to scale up the market. And this lack of capacity is observed in municipalities in Chile, in India, in Morocco. Probably you are experiencing the same in Colombia, but also in the UK, which is a relatively new market for district energy as well. And how could we overcome this challenge? Well, one way of doing it is setting up institutional structures at the national level, some sort of national district energy office to provide some technical assistance to municipalities to support project development. This is, for example, the model that the UK has put in place. Their Department of Business, Energy and Industry has created a heat networks development unit to accelerate the deployment of district energy networks in the UK. And at UNEP, we are currently supporting Chile to follow up a similar model. Chile has recently established a district energy office at the Sustainable Energy Agency with 3 engineers and a lawyer that are receiving support also from UNEP through the District Energy Cities Initiative to specifically provide technical assistance to municipalities and to city officials and help them review the project ideas, improve the business case for the projects, identify a suitable business model, make the projects bankable, and provide guidance for the procurement process. And this brings me to the second point and the second barrier. The second challenge, I would say, that we usually face when we are supporting countries in the development of the first projects, and it's trying to identify a suitable mechanism in the country to tender the first district energy projects. Municipalities are usually used to tender waste management facilities or public lighting or water supply. But when it comes to the first district energy projects, nobody knows what authority has the mandate to launch the tendering process, who should manage the process, what is the project ownership model. Can a municipality in Colombia, for example, own a district cooling network? Can it sign a concession contract with a private company for the construction and operation of the network for 30 years? Is it very likely that the network goes through public roads? Who should give permits for that? Can a district cooling plant actually be built in the city because it's a energy generation plant? Can it be in the city? Are there any regulations for this? So all these questions need an answer, and the only way of getting these answers is through development of demonstration projects. For example, can provide an example in Chile because we're working there. We realized with the Ministry of Energy that municipalities can't issue there the call for tender, and that the tendering process had to be channeled to the Ministry of Public Works. We didn't know that at the beginning. No? It was also identified that, in fact, private companies, a private utility, had the possibility of proposing projects if they were considered to be public goods. They had the possibility of proposing these projects themselves to the Ministry of Public Works for their consideration, and from there start launching the procurement process of the project. So all this needs to be answered. Sometimes changes or updates to existing regulations may be required to enable project development. It has been therefore very useful for the team in Chile to integrate a lawyer in the district energy office to guide the team on how to solve some of these regulatory issues and some of these barriers that come from the regulatory side. From our experience, to initiate a market, you need some sort of stakeholder coordination structure in place, because you will need like a teamwork. You need to keep the machine running. You know, you need local authorities working together with the utilities, with the private sector, with the public sector, and work across several ministries, because there's some sort of regulations that might be tackled from one ministry, others from the other. So I know, for example, provide some example in Chile, the work on district energy goes across the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Housing, and the Ministry of Public Works, so that they can develop an enabling framework that attracts investment. And just to conclude and sum up, what I would like to say is that we have observed in the past years that there are plenty of private investors, private energy companies that are well set in Latin America and in the world in general, and development banks that are willing to finance district energy projects and clean heating and clean cooling projects. And Peter will for sure elaborate more on this but especially in emerging economies and developing countries, there is a need to reinforce the project preparatory phase to make the projects bankable and bring them to a point where they are ready to be taken by a development bank or an investor. And this gap, well, this is a challenge that needs to be addressed, and well, it's a gap that's maybe with support from national governments could be addressed. And I leave it there. There's plenty of barriers and ways to overcome them, but I leave it there. Over to you, Natalia. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Celia. And I'm very glad that you highlight all these obstacles that we already face in the project that we support together with the Colombian, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Energy, and with the support of CIS Economic Cooperation. And absolutely, I want to just bring more into the surface this aspect that you mentioned, Celia, on the need of having different views, different expertise here in the development on energy projects. I'm very glad to hear that there are other countries that are beginning to think about to establish specific units of on energy districts. That says a lot. So that implicates that energy district can play a strong role in cities. And one thing I want to highlight that actually Reto underscored in his presentation is that these projects are about people. And he presented a stakeholder analysis that was very impressive, like the type of expertise, different expertise, legal expertise, engineering expertise that you need on this. So I'm very glad that you highlight that aspect, and in fact, in the project that we support, we are doing like that. We are overcoming this barrier through these steering committees that are playing in a way this type of units more institutionalized in cities. And this is a perfect introduction to the other question that I will ask to Marco, because it's linked with this teamwork that are behind the energy districts projects. And of course, linked with the institutional setting and engagement with the private sector. What can be considered, Marco, as the institutional setting related with energy district projects, and why it's so relevant for the deployment of this infrastructure in Latin America? And I will attach to this another question, is that what is the role of that engagement with the private sector playing in boosting energy districts in Latin America? So institutional setting and the role of private sector.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry. Thank you very much, Natalia, and thanks to organizer for the invitation. It's a pleasure and also a privilege, I have to say, because Celia, Casper, and Peter have definitely longer experience in energy district, but I will try to, share some of the learning from the work, especially that we are doing here in Colombia. Going to the institutional setting, as it was mentioned already this morning by Director Sacker and also Christina and Celia. But we have, I would say, a national level setting that has a role in shaping and enabling energy district deployment. And here in Colombia, we're working with Ministry of Environment, Energy, UPME, and recently we have started to work with the Ministry of Education, Housing. I mean, we have a policy element, we have a legislative and regulatory element, a professional qualification, but I think that there is a wide range of national level pieces of the puzzle that have to be supportive of energy district. And then we have the city local level that Celia, I think, has described very well, where municipalities have probably the biggest role and responsibility, again, to enabling and supporting energy district, and then, of course, the private sector. Celia mentioned energy utilities, absolutely a key role, energy service providers. So now, in between, at least this is my personal positioning of the academia, but I think universities can play a quite strategic role also in bridging these two levels. Now, within the Colombia project, the institutions have this responsibility for policy and regulation, something that has worked very well in terms of approach was to try to integrate energy district in the existing regulation and policies, but building on what is in existence rather than trying to develop something brand new. And I think that Christina presented earlier on, I think there are excellent results on the regulation for thermal system installation. We have also made the fiscal regime for thermal energy more supportive. Now, from the institutional setting, I think we have then get into the energy district implementation and actions. Now, energy districts, as Reto and Celia mentioned, they are and have to be implemented locally. And I would say they have to fit and to benefit the local context. And almost always, if not always, they involve multi-stakeholders, complex infrastructural projects. So there is a need to get the buy-in, the support of all these stakeholders. Now, something that has worked, a mechanism, in my experience, extremely well, I would say unparalleled in my experience, is this establishment of the energy district steering committees, where there is participation from, of course, the municipality, together with the different departments that are present in the municipality that have a responsibility and a voice in the identification, development, approval of energy district projects, but also members of the private sector or energy utility, energy service providers. But this district steering committee with, I think this is also a critical success factor. Each committee has a city coordinator, but each committee has a professional from the city that is supporting the steering committee, that is steering and helping in driving the work program, building awareness, and of course facilitating the identification and development of projects. So I would say that these steering committee are an excellent idea, and to the merit of phase one SECO learning, I would say that this steering committee have also become a go-to entity for market players, but it has been a very good platform to get more discussion and cooperation going with between municipality and stakeholders and market players and private sector. Moving to the engagement, the steering committee already, I think, can provide an effective tool for engagement with the private sector. Another mechanism that within the Distrito Térmico in Colombia has proved very effective is the use of competitive call for proposals. We are using this to award significant technical assistance packages within the scope of contracts between UNIDO and energy district developers or engineering design company or potential users. And the purpose, role of this type of engagement, the call for proposal, was first to de-risking the identification, development of energy district projects slash solutions that for many market players are outside the business as usual. So to de-risk a bit, moving away from the business as usual, to provide advisory services that today are probably more available to the team of the Distrito Térmico program, and third, to building and strengthening the capacity of a large number of prospective or potential market player for energy district in Colombia, meaning potential clients, potential energy district developers, engineering company again, but so that we could create a sort of critical mass of market players that can either supply or demand energy district services. So I think that this instrument has been very effective as engagement with the private sector. And then very closely, briefly, of course, a partnership like the one with Acaire Business Association that can ensure connectivity with almost all stakeholders related to energy district has a critical role to play for continuity and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marco, and this opens me the opportunity to thank very much to all the local coordinators that are present in our Congress. Absolutely, they play a key role because they are agents of building bridges among different stakeholders in cities. So thank you very much for this role that you are undertaking, and you highlighted different instruments that from the cooperation, international cooperation, we can support. This call of proposals definitely has been a very good mechanism to share knowledge, to share all this knowledge that we are consolidating on, because we are in the 8th year of supporting Colombia in this, in the promotion of energy districts, and this has been really a key instrument to boost this type of projects in Colombia. Then I would like to move to Peter, and Peter comes from the World Bank and another ally, an important ally of the Swiss cooperation in the promotion of energy efficiency. And I want to ask him a question that on a topic that has been highlighted from the beginning, and is the role of renewables and residual energy in the operation of energy districts. So in your experience, Peter, what is the role of renewable energy sources and energy efficiency in district cooling, and what can Latin America energy district projects can, well, learn from the more advanced experiences in other parts of the world?
Thank you very much, Natalia. First of all, it's a privilege to address all these people that are interested in something that maybe not a lot of people know about or are interested in, but nevertheless is very important because it's part of the future. I want to give you a little bit of my background for coming into this discussion. I'm from Denmark, as is Kasper, so you have a panel that's heavily skewed towards a very small country, which is unique in one way, is that it's the country in the world with most district energy, because practically all cities and even minor small settlements, they have district energy. Well, mostly heating, but of course cooling is coming in now as well. So we have a long history, about 100 years, of having introduced this all over the country. And so that's sort of in my DNA, if you will. But I've also worked with district heating across the world, and I know how difficult it is to talk about, something that you will have to share. Let me say, this is the first thing. When you talk about these systems, they're shared systems, and it means that you need a level of cooperation, of regulation, and you need a level of, let's say, common understanding being built about how these things are supposed to work. And that's the challenge that we see. And coming into this in a Latin American context, I see that as one of the main challenges, because this is not as normal as it is, and not as simple as it sounds. It can be quite complicated. But, we could also ask ourselves, why do we need to do this? If it's so difficult, and if it's a tough sell sometimes. And I'd like to come to that discussion from a climate change angle. And the World Bank's angle on this is that of looking at it at a larger perspective of decarbonization, and looking at what does it take to get to a full decarbonization. And in that aspect, district energy is part of the energy supply system. And if you look at it holistically and look at how you can optimize across that system, then district energy offers some huge advantages, which you don't have if you just, let's say, we could go business as usual. We have a lot of heating units that are individual air conditioners or small-scale, building-based systems. And they will normally be powered by most of the time, electricity. They can be powered by gas technically, but electricity most of the time. And then if you green that electricity, then everything will be fine. You don't have to discuss this anymore, or not. And I think this is the key thing you have to think about. Because of the timing of this, the cheapest energy going forward is probably going to come from solar. Solar will give you energy in a time interval from around 9 o'clock in the morning to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, depending on time zone, etc. And outside that, you would have to store energy if you want to use solar energy. And so solar energy is great to cool in the middle of the day, but you need cooling throughout the day. You need also cooling in the evening, and you need cooling in the night. So because of this, central systems, they can have storage. So I would look at it very much from the storage perspective. Ice storages or water storages, that's part of what we should be looking for, and part of the reason why we want to push district energy, because it gives us the possibility to play around with the different options we have. As does electric cars and e-mobility, it's one of the other things. As does green hydrogen, it's one of the other things. All of these things are things that we work on within the bank, and when we discuss with the different governments here in the region, to try to see how can we further decarbonize, and how can we make all these things play together, and to create flexibility and ability to absorb power and use it optimally from solar is a key perspective. So that's one of the angles, at least, I would take into this discussion and put on the table here. This is one of the things that we can use to argue for pushing in this direction. It does also present a couple of other advantages I just want to mention. One of them is economy of scale. So if you're building a new system, then you can get economy of scale by heating many units, many square feet of office space or living space at a lower price, because you simply have a big efficient system that you use. And thirdly, in climates like in places in Colombia, you would have a heating need as well as a cooling need. So you would have heating in some parts of the year and cooling in some parts of the year. And you can use the same system for both. You can switch it around. It's not optimal for the pipes, and it does present some technical issues to do it, but it's been done, and it's been done many places. So again, you don't have a seasonality issue, because you can use the hardware around the year. So I think I've said some of the more important things in terms of why we need to do this and why we need to move this ahead. But I also want to mention that it all has to take place in a in a planned approach going forward. If we look at it realistically, you're not going to do a lot of retrofitting to get district cooling in. You would need to focus on new buildings. This needs to be integrated in when you plan for new parts of cities to be reconstructed, or to use new parts of the cities to be constructed. That's where you need to think in the district cooling as probably should be your preferred alternative for cooling, and that needs to be understood. If we look at climate change in the very long perspective, so the next 50 years, that's what we should concentrate on. And in 50 years, most of the buildings that will be standing there will not have been built yet. So to build those buildings well, those that will be standing in 2070, that's what we're looking at. Build those well, then we will be much better off at that time. Of course, we can retrofit when the time comes, but right now we're talking about getting the new buildings right. And to get that done from a regulatory point of view, to make sure that the incentives are aligned, and make sure that when we do the planning, the urban planning and the energy planning, coming back to that holistic perspective I talked about, that we do that well and taking into account the long-term prospect of decarbonization. Just the final thing I wanted to say, and because I think I've already spent my time, is that at least from a regulatory perspective, we should push that all new building from a given date should be prepared for district cooling. You may not need to put the district cooling in now. That's going to be difficult. But you can make sure that it's prepared for it when the system comes. That could be a big step forward. Because the big problem, I can tell you, when you start looking at it and you see the existing city, retrofitting is virtually impossible. So it's very difficult to do district cooling in a simple way. I mean, you can retrofit, it's just more expensive than if you build it from the beginning. I'll stop here, and whatever else I have to say, I'll try to respond to questions. Thank you very much. Back to you, Natalie.
Thank you very much, Peter, and you bring an interesting point from this decarbonization perspective, and a narrative on the opportunity of energy district, definitely on areas with urban expansion in cities. Of course, the retrofitting aspect, it would be challenging, but well, an area that must be tackled in terms of energy districts, but we take very much your message on like concentrating and be very aware on building from the beginning, or think about from the beginning this type of energy solutions in urban developments. So I will stop here and we'll ask some questions from the audience. I don't know if somebody here wants to ask a specific question to our panelists. If not, I already have some from our virtual participants. So this question is going like this. The growing demand of air conditioning systems due to climate change and residential and commercial growth in low-income urban areas, where initial investment costs are prioritized to solve this need, how to encourage private developers to implement thermal district projects and achieve their financial closure? Do you know of any experience in Latin America or in other parts of the world of energy district projects in low-income urban areas? I think it's a question that it's open to all the panelists, so who wants to jump in?
Well, I can take a first shot at it. I think that the question actually is a very good one, because it emphasizes the key problem you'd have. If we want to look for social equity, it's going to be very difficult, because all the first projects will be for university campuses. It will be for downtown business districts, where you have the possibility to have a very high intensity of cooling need, because that's the that's the best predictor for the feasibility of making district cooling. And the last places you're going to do it will be in existing buildings, in more remote areas of town, in the barrios of the different cities where the poorer people live. And of course, these people also need cooling. So it is a societal job to also think in terms of how this is going to be handled. And that's a far more difficult thing to do. As I said, it has to be a stepwise approach. Unfortunately, you will have to start with where it makes most sense financially and then slowly build from there. But you are not going to be able to align your social equity objectives with your financial viability objectives in the beginning, unfortunately. I may be looking at it a bit too pessimistically, so I'd be happy to be contradicted by some of my fellow panelists. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Peter.
I completely agree,
sure.
Peter. If I may, sorry,
go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that there are many district cooling projects and district heating projects in developing economies. For example, in India, we are working on several district cooling projects. China has plenty of them, but it is true that to start the market, you need to start where it is economically and technically feasible, and so that you can demonstrate the technology, and maybe with the time, you can make this network grow and connect other buildings that are maybe around this, I don't know, a business center, and then you can connect these low-income houses or buildings to the already built district cooling network. But start from there, it is very, very complicated, and also district cooling, most of the district cooling projects start with connecting commercial buildings, so it's not something that you would start for the residential sector. District heating is different. District heating, you have plenty of examples where you can connect residential sector, and there are in fact many examples in Europe of social buildings that are being connected to district heating networks. So I think that with district heating might be more easier to connect to low-income areas, low-income urban areas with social buildings and so on. But with cooling, I think it's a bit more complicated because it's more for commercial. So you will start trying to identify hospitals or businesses or shopping centers to start the network. So it's a bit more complicated.
Great. Anyone else who wants to give their vision? Yeah.
Thank you. No, actually, it would be just to support, at least from the existing experience here in Colombia, what Peter and Celia mentioned. However, there is a plan to start at least looking at what might be the possibility and what could be then the cost in terms of additional financial support. But I mentioned before that the Ministry of Housing came into the picture of the project, and it would be also to explore views and if anything could be done. But I agree with Peter and Celia. Thank you.
Thank you. No, that was a very very good question, and brings the element of poverty, on this discussion. Like really, energy efficiency and all these aspects have to think about how do we reduce inequality as well. And of course, as you mentioned, Marco, the discussion with the Ministry of Housing will be very relevant during the coming years, as the social housing projects are a very fertile terrain for energy districts. So as I know that we are running out of time, I will jump to a final question to all of you and to give the opportunity, to give voice of to the organization that each of you represent. So how energy districts fit into your energy and climate change mitigation portfolio or strategy according to each of your organization? And what would be a final message that you would like to share with the audience? So who wants to start? Casper, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I also agree with what was said previously about where to start with district cooling. So just to come back on this, so UNDP has worked with the National Ozone Unit in Colombia almost 10 years ago when the original plan for the Albucana project was conceived in the context of the CFC chillers replacement project. And since then, we have been working with several countries in Latin America and the Caribbean about the development of feasibility and business case studies with the intention to bring these projects to the pre- and investment phase. So this fits into UNDP's work because UNDP is leading the work on the climate promise in more than 100 developing countries around the world, where the aim is to enhance the ambition in the national determined contributions of the countries, and where we see that the cooling sector, and especially district cooling, has the potential to provide important contributions for the future. So UNDP has also partnered with DEFCO from Sweden, which is a consulting firm that has experience around the world to provide technical assistance and to provide advice to governments, utility companies, and to develop potential pilots for district cooling. So we try to look at it slightly different than many of the others. Our approach has been to look at pilots that are often smaller in size and with fewer off-takers to kind of try to simplify it as much as possible. Our idea has been to show the proof of concept to local stakeholders and to create the capacities at the national level, and at the same time try to provide confidence in the concept of district cooling. As was mentioned by other panel members, it's not an issue that is easy to work on, but the potential is huge. So we believe that when you enter into a new country, it's very important that the first pilots that you start up in a country are done properly with all the proper guidance that can be provided externally and internally to create this confidence. So our focus is not limited to the technical solutions. We believe that a good business case must be built from the beginning. It has to be a sustainable business to make financial sense for the parties that are involved with it. But it must also be supported by a strong management structure to support the development, the operation, and the maintenance of the future districts. It's important to have clear rules in place from the beginning. So we rely on technical assistance and guidance from experts that have done district coolings in many other parts of the world. So just to be short on this, so for UNDP, this is a strategic area of work for the future. As I mentioned, we have been working on it for now the past 10 years, but we have scaled up our work in the past 3 to 4 years. We hope that we can help to introduce the first pilots in some of the countries we're working in by providing the technical assistance that is needed, and to work with governments, to work with private sector, to work with the utility companies, so that we can show this proof of concept. It was a bit the way that it's also been developed in other parts of the world, like in Stockholm, which now covers most of the capital. They started with many small districts that then over time have been connected to larger districts. So we're trying to follow a similar approach where we start small, but to prove that this is a good sub-concept with good business around it. So thanks a lot to everybody, and good luck with the workshop.
Great, thank you very much, Casper. Who wants to go next? Maybe Celia or Peter, Marco.
Thank you. Now, UNIDO has a mandate for inclusive and sustainable industrial development. But the sustainability of industry, which is referring to manufacturing, but also tourism sector, energy utilities, should not be pursued in isolation from the rest. I think that, as also Peter mentioned before, but there are a number of studies that are showing that to decarbonize, to achieve the goals that have been set, it will be required to really improve the management and the integration between energy supply and energy demand. And this integration goes also through integration or different way of planning infrastructure. If I remember correctly, I think that Denmark is not only the leading in general on energy district, but they have very good stories and experience in integrating, for instance, industrial plants within the district energy network. Then the work of UNIDO is also on technology transfer, on building supply chains and market transformation. And we see very good relevance and synergy also in the space of energy district. In terms of, I don't know, message, I would say that energy district is a very mature technology solution. Again, Peter mentioned 100 years. And it is shown that it can deliver really good economic, environmental, and social benefits, also in the context of Latin America, where the demand for cooling, for instance, is projected to increase 5 times by 2050. So I would conclude by saying, encouraging the national and local governments from Latin America to really increase the level of attention and effort in enabling and promoting energy district, like Colombia is doing, and to the market players like energy utilities, energy service providers, developers, engineering company, but to look more closely to energy district and to integrate it as quickly as possible in their climate or sustainability strategy, and especially their business development plans. Thank you.
Great, it was very interesting to know that, well, this is a strategic area of these institutions, and that you will play this role of integrating these different stakeholders. I don't know, Celia or Peter wants to share. Peter?
I'm fine going, but I think it's more polite to let ladies first. So if Celia wants to come in, I'm happy to wait.
No problem. You can go on.
Thank you, Celia.
Don't worry, go on. No problem.
As you can see, I'm a very old-fashioned person. Listen, from the World Bank point of view, this is, as I said, an emerging agenda. We are really interested in supporting it. And right now, so my work is to try to build up energy programs with the 6 Latin American countries, spanning from Honduras down to Panama, and also in the Dominican Republic. And I'm happy to say that cooling is featuring prominently in all of them. And everybody knows that cooling is just going to be much bigger in the future. And that's why it is interesting to focus on. So the focus is already starting to be there. And we've had very good discussions in some of these countries on ministerial level with people that are very enthusiastic about doing something about cooling. Maybe district cooling is not the first thing that pops up, but it's part of the bigger solution. And I think that's where we want to put it. I'm happy to say that we already have some funding from the Green Climate Fund that we can use for El Salvador and for Panama, and I'm talking to the governments there about how to possibly use this as part of the World Bank's worldwide cooling facility, which is, this is just the first phase of that, and it's a fairly limited amount of money, a little over 150 million that was provided from GCF for that. But, we believe that more money will come that way, and cooling will be getting a bigger and bigger share, and district cooling will be able to carve out its part of that. So there will be concessional funding coming in to grease the wheels for the transition we're talking about here. I think that as the World Bank, and I believe I speak for my developing colleagues in IDB, in CAPE, or in the other banks that are active in the area, it's really about three things. It's regulatory. That's where we can help. We can try to make sure that regulatory obstacles are removed in good time. There are energy efficiency laws. There are energy laws. There are energy action plans, etc. In these plans, you have to look through them and see, because you're doing some other regulatory changes, are you also thinking about this? And that would be the number one thing, because it takes a long time to do regulation. It can take 4 or 5 years. It needs to be well prepared, and then it needs to come through a political process. Once you have it done, it's firm and it stays in there, and you have the right framework. So that's very important, and that's where we should push. The second is financing, which is the obvious one to think about. Now, I think a lot of this would be private sector finance. So it would be, let's say, within the World Bank group, we see more play for IFC and working on these things. But there will be some things that the World Bank itself can finance from our loans. But I think mostly this is about, mobilizing finance and making it sure that it's part of the development process, that you look at financeability as you develop your ideas and your plans. And finally, and I think that catches on to something I think that Marcus said, we need to pilot some things. But when we pilot, it's not the technical thing we're piloting. I mean, the technical aspects of district cooling and of cooling are well understood by experts, and also already tried out at scale many places, in university campuses all over the world, in business districts all over the world. This works. And we don't have to pilot technical feasibility. It's the business models we need to pilot. And that, again, comes in. The money has to come from the private sector in these investments. It has to come from endowments and foundations, if you're talking about universities or other things. But these are things that can be made feasible, and you need to find good models to put it in. So regulation, business models, and then coming in finance, those are the three things that we will try to bring in. World Bank stands ready to fund technical assistance in this area. We stand ready to be in policy dialogue, to help on the regulatory frameworks, to assist governments in moving this agenda forward, and of course, eventually to provide the financing needed. Thank you very much. And now over to Silja.
Thanks. So from my side, or UNEP side, the work of UNEP to promote district energy systems is delivered through the District Energy and Cities Initiative, and it's framed under UNEP's work to accelerate the energy transition at the city level. So we know that heating and hot water and cooling account for 60% more or less of global energy consumption in buildings, and most of it comes from fossil fuels. We know that. We also know that buildings and the construction of buildings are responsible for more or less 1/3 of global energy consumption and 40% of CO2 energy related emissions. So to keep global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees, as agreed in the Paris Agreement, it is crucial to address how we heat and cool buildings in our cities. And in this context, UNEP sees district energy systems as a cost-effective solution to supply heating and cooling in dense urban areas where it makes sense. and cities around the world are relying on district heating and cooling to meet their climate targets because of what my colleagues have said, because it helps them improve energy efficiency, because it helps reduce local air pollution, because it helps to incorporate higher rates of local renewable sources, as Peter was mentioning before, because it may be the only way, or it is, I think, the only way of utilizing waste heat and natural free cooling sources like lakes, sea, or rivers, which are energy sources that otherwise would be untapped. No? So UNEP also encourages the development of district cooling as an efficient approach to phase down HFC emissions and help countries meet the refrigerant emissions phase down, scheduled, ratified under the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, as very well explained by Casper at the beginning. And last, UNEP is also hosting the Cool Coalition Secretariat, and district cooling is one of the key areas of work of the coalition. A sustainable urban cooling handbook has been recently released. It was launched last week during the COP26 in Glasgow as a guide that offers city planners the wide range of existing options and innovative approaches to cool cities in a sustainable way. And district cooling is featured there as one of these key solutions to cool cities. And as a final message, I just would like to say that cities play a crucial role in the energy transition. They are responsible of 70% of energy-related global emissions, and we are in the decade to act, to scale up the deployment of clean technologies and innovative solutions, and district cooling should be among the package of solutions that municipalities and local governments should consider to supply high efficient and low carbon cooling to dense urban areas. I think the IEA has just released this morning its energy efficiency report for 2021, and it shows that we need to double the rate of improvement of energy efficiency to achieve net zero by 2050. So that this means that there is still a lot to be done, and many opportunities for the district cooling market to grow. So thank you very much. I leave you there. Over to you, Natalia.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter and Celia and Marco and Caspar for all these messages, and absolutely to highlight the fact that we have to double our efforts in order to avoid to reach this dangerous line of 1.5 Celsius degrees. And yeah, for highlighting these specific aspects on the energy district project that we have to take into account, as you mentioned, Peter, the regulatory, the financial aspect, and of course the piloting of business models and other aspects are definitely relevant. And from the Swiss Economic Cooperation, we are very glad that we are in the right way to support energy districts in considering all these aspects. And most of all, we are very happy that we rely on a very key team behind this project that combines not only Swiss expertise, but more important Colombian expertise that knows specifically all the particularities of the Colombian cities. So I would like to thank you again for your time. Sorry for the delay again, and thanks to all the audience who accompany us and who are in virtual mode. And I invite you to continue to follow up this Congress during the 2 following days. Thanks very much.
Bueno, perfecto. Muchísimas gracias, Natalia Mayorga, por conducir este panel tan interesante.